3 segment, an Afrocentric perspective on African and African American history in Detroit. This is a Get Up, Stand Up show. You're viewing us on TV 33 WHPR, broadcasting live from the capital of the African world, Detroit / Highland Park, Michigan. We're live streaming at tv33whpr.com. You can view us via the Android app. We're also available, the Android app, which is available at the Google Play Store, or the Apple app, which is available at the Apple App Store. You can also view us via Google TV, the Roku box, and Comcast Channel 91. Tune in, turn on, view us, lend us your support. Lend us your spirit and your energy. And I wanted to ask you if you could sit up just a little so the Facebook viewers can see you. Hopefully that's better. The Roku box, Comcast Channel 91. Tune in, turn on, lend us, view us, listen in, share your perspective, and need be, send us a word either via TV or Facebook, and we are broadcasting via TV and Facebook. If we get our facts a little bit out of alignment, sometimes I get a little off, I get excited or whatever. And you can call in on TV at 313-868-0351, 868-4336, 868-0342. And as always, we begin our show with a moment of silence for our African ancestors, and we acknowledge, commemorate, venerate, and memorialize the spirit of those Africans that went before us, but not just those that came and went in terms of living and dying, those that lived their lives in a way that was conducive of making life better for black people and contributing to our struggle for liberation, who lived their lives in that way and in some cases died in the process of doing so. So we take a moment of silence for our African ancestors. We say Asante Sana, Madasi Pa, Asheo. Thank you very much for your sacrifice. And I'm honored to have in the studio with me today Barbara Bonotchi Montgomery, who's a community activist, educator, scholar, historian, Meganetic specialist. And today, the focus of the program, we're going to be talking about education and miseducation. Before we jump into our topic, I want to make a few announcements. Of course, as usual, and I won't go into the long spiel I usually do about the Detroit Black Food Security Network, we urge you, these are brothers and sisters that are working diligently to provide a means. They're growing food, they're producing and creating institutions that are designed to enable us to produce our own food and to distribute it in our community and whoever may need it in a way that is predicated on self-sufficiency and self-determination, or in other words, what we in the African community call Kujichagulia, which means self-determination in Kiswahili. So we urge you to donate to the Detroit Black Food Security Network. You can reach them. You can Google the full name, or you can reach them at www.dbcfsn.org. That's dbcfsn.org on the internet. Also, I urge everyone to remember, and this is something that gets by us often. This month, September, is Black Reading Month, or African Reading Month. And if I wasn't on TV or wasn't trying to always promote the program and what we're doing here, I would say turn the TV off. So we don't want you to, don't turn off WHPR at this moment. We want you to support black businesses, but we urge you, read a book, and more specifically, read a book by an African author. Promote reading to your children. Read to your children. It's very important that we consistently work to enhance our literacy, our ability to read and write as well. So we urge you to celebrate Black Reading Month, pull away from the television set, and read at least one book. Quick announcements for the Charles Wright Museum. This Thursday, September the 6th, the 4th annual General Baker Tribute, the 50th anniversary of the League of Revolutionary Workers. There'll be a program at the Charles Wright Museum, which is at 315 East Warren, and that's September the 6th, 2018 at 6 p.m. Also, September the 8th, this Saturday, the museum will be celebrating the 55th anniversary of the 1963 Birmingham church bombing, where 4 little girls were killed in the church by a bomb that was planted there by domestic terrorists. See, when it comes to people committing crimes against black folks in this country, they don't want to call it terrorism. They don't want to call it what it is. So we urge you to come out. There'll be two featured speakers, Sarah Collins Rudolph and Sister Mamie King Chalmers, also known as Zawadi, who was very active in the civil rights movement at that time. And Mama Zawadi, Mamie King, is right here in our community, one of the few people that are still alive that was working and doing the work during the civil rights movement. Also, this Sunday, September the 9th, is Free Second Sunday. And that's Sunday from 1 to 5 p.m. Admission to the museum is free. So we urge you to come out to the museum, particularly at this time. Not only come and take advantage of the free membership, but there's some struggles going on at the museum to retain a sense of agency, African agency and self-determination. There's a struggle between corporate entities and community factors in terms of trying to determine the focus or the direction the museum should take. The museum is doing a lot of positive programming like the Liberation Film Series, bringing in key grassroots black nationalists, Pan-Africanist leaders and speakers, and we need to retain that aspect and other programming that is essential to helping to facilitate the education and upliftment of our people. So we urge you to support the museum, buy a membership, and if you haven't been, or if you have been, take advantage of a particular entity that sponsors Second Sundays, which their admission to the museum is free. Fortunately or unfortunately, I'm not going to mention the corporate sponsor at this time. Also, September the 9th, the same day, Legacy of Literacy program presents children's interactive story time, and a very prominent storyteller, singer, musician, drummer, Sister Jara McKinney will be telling stories to young people. And the Legacy of Literacy program is a program founded and facilitated by one of our own community elders and very staunch activists for education, promotion of culture, and that's none other than Elma Greer. And I know she would probably not like the idea of me promoting her, but she promotes literacy, this program, Legacy of Literacy. She also has a program, I think it's called Black Men Read, where they put books in barbershops to encourage men to read and to read to their children. So we urge you to come out to that. Bring your children out to the Legacy of Literacy program, September 9th, this Sunday. And for any information pertaining to the programs at the Charles Wright Museum, which is at 315 East Warren, you can call 313-494-5800 for further information. Now, I have my regular notes, but what I'm going to do is, since we have our distinguished guests in the studio, we'll forgo that for today, or if time allows, we'll come back around and do the thing where I borrow from Ken Coleman's book, This Day, African American Life, or This Day in Detroit, which looks at different historical figures and events that occurred in Detroit history. And of course, the focus of this show, as reflected in the name, is Black in the Day in the 313. So we reflect on African history in Detroit. And when I say African, for people that may get confused, I use that to describe all African people. You're either a diasporic African or a continental African. Without further ado, I want to introduce my brother, comrade in struggle, and I've listed the things that you do. I'm sure it was not exhaustive because you've been around the community for a long time doing the work that is essential to facilitating our liberation. I'd like to welcome Barbara Bonotchi, and I have to give credit where it's due. You prompted me to make this the focus of the show today, which was education versus education. I have some really strong feelings about education and miseducation, but I'd like to maybe you can begin by telling us what prompted you to want to make this the focus of the show today.
I had a recent experience whereas I graduated from the University of Michigan Dearborn last December. Right? So I spent a few years there. And during my experience in school, I saw that the young kids that were being educated in our school system, the black children, they were not prepared to understand life in America. Um, they have, thanks to our educational system, I found that the youth have no understanding of their history, of themselves. They have no understanding that Africans in America had to fight. It was, a struggle. So the educational experience from, I saw that the process is a process of miseducation. The children are not equipped once they leave high school or higher education to understand America. They have no understanding of how race has shaped every aspect of American culture. Uh, so that for example, slavery is domestic terrorism,
Okay.
but it's never defined that way.
Right.
So, and slavery in America in the history books is not even discussed thoroughly. Um, the the evil that slavery was is never revealed.
Now, let me just interject for a minute, if you don't mind. Now, what you're saying now is a reflection of your experiences as from the perspective of being a student in the classroom.
From being, yes,
But what I want to also get you to ask you to maybe compare it to or consider. You're an educator,
yes,
so we know you were educating. You've been educating young people for a very long time, and more
right,
specifically, you have taught in at least one, if not several, African-centered schools. So, how would you compare maybe how you think the African-centered schools prepared young people for the experience in comparison to what you saw with the students or the young people you sat in the classroom with?
our education is basic, so that in school, um, I changed on the map, right?
Hmm. You got to be a little more specific.
Yes, I'm going to say
You
that
changed the
I
map.
changed. I changed on the map. We are taught in our school that south is down, north is up. East is on the
Right.
is right, and
Hmm.
left is on the left.
Hmm.
Well, in the ancient African language of the Nile Valley, we see that the world was turned upside down, or the world was reversed, whereas south was up. Now, I know this has been a little esoteric,
Hmm.
but what I'm saying is that we have to have a reverse psychological understanding of almost everything, so that the history that we have been taught in school is made up, it's fabricated,
Fabricated.
so that we have to understand that all humanity starts in Africa. That means that all thinking, all intellectual aspects started in Africa.
Hmm.
In in Western history, they teach you that intellectual accomplishments did not start until what? The Greeks.
Exactly.
Well, okay, Africans had philosophical systems that was hundreds of thousands of years old by the
Mm.
time the Greeks came along.
Hmm.
So, but without understanding that, we talk about the causes of what racism. We have to realize is that you cannot have respect for something that you don't know about. So, by not knowing about our history, and by not understanding that all civilization starts in Africa, we sold a brainwashing idea that all intellectual activities start with Greeks and is what is also European.
Exactly.
So that there's a misconnect that almost everyone gets who is educated under the
Traditional.
Western historiography, as it's called, that all intellectual thinking is with Europeans.
Mhm.
So that even today, when we look for answers for our situations, we don't examine our history. We look
Mhm.
for European history for the answers for
Answers to our problems.
our problems.
Well-
Now, socially, that's a problem because it's European history that has us in this situation.
So we, in essence, is like taking the problem to the perpetrator, or it's like seeking a solution from the person or the entity that caused the problem. But what I wanted to know is people like yourself, Malik Yakini, Sister Nkaruka, uh, Baba Mzee, and these are names that may not mean anything to other people, Mami Mani, and others sought to create a system of education that was antithetical to that or
Yes.
counter to that.
Yes.
So could
Based
you,
on facts.
based on facts, so
Yes.
could you maybe share a little bit about your experiences and do if you think that the effort in African-centered education was effective in trying to counter what you saw in your experiences while you were at U of M?
Yes. Uh, the African-centered education, I could see it in my own household.
Mm-hmm.
I had a youth, a daughter,
Mm-hmm.
and she went through a whole educational experience through an African-centered school.
Yes.
Right? And she did not get, or she did not step outside of that African-centered curriculum until she went to U of M.
Right. She went to U of M as
Right.
well.
Now, there's a big myth that, of course, African-centered education, that they lack the so-called the so-called technical skills, right?
Mm-hmm.
She went to U of M without a problem, and
Mhm.
She graduated with honors because
Mhm.
the African-centered education prepared her culturally so that she had no misunderstanding about what she could do from a cultural, historical perspective.
Mhm.
Whereas our youth, because they're so hung up in Western ideology, when they come to school, they're looking for white people to understand everything. They're looking for white people to tell them how to live their lives
Mhm.
socially.
Mhm.
Well, this is a problem. In the 60s, we at least understood that you went to school to become educated so that you could get a job. But socially, you had to educate ourselves. And so I find in the educational system, that's what's missing.
Mhm.
African-centered education was built around providing the missing historical and cultural aspects that they were not getting in the normal educational setting.
Mm-hmm. And so we know in 1933, I think it was, Carter G. Woodson, I think that's the year he published the book Miseducation of the Negro. You have any thoughts about how his theses, if you will, in that book kind of really projected almost 100 years ago what you're saying you realized as you sat in these classrooms with young people, what they would call mainly millennials, I think it is, right?
Yes, yes.
So how do you fit Carter G. Woodson's perspective into what your experiences were?
They express it. Carter G. Woodson said that we have an educational system that is better suited for whites to empower whites.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what you get. I used to always give this example to my youth, and that was, they tell you to what? Be like Mike. But I said
Right.
no. Mike is, and of course, is who? Is Michael Jordan,
Yes.
right? I used to tell them no. That's a Dodge.
A Dodge.
A Dodge.
What do you mean by a Dodge?
Well, the person, Mike is fine, right? But
Mm.
Mike is paid by somebody.
This is true.
So that's that's the guy who you need to understand.
The guy that's paying him.
Right, the guy that pays Mike. You don't want to be
Right.
like Mike. You want to be the guy that pay Mike.
The guy that's signing the check.
The guy that signs the check. But what our educational teaches us not to be owners.
Right.
To go out and what? And to get a job.
To get a job.
So now we find that we don't produce anything in America, or we don't own anything
Right.
in America. In our neighborhoods, we don't own any of the stores.
Right. And you
The
and I
businesses.
grew up in a time when you still saw a significant portion of African American ownership
Yes.
of the cleaners, the barber shop, the fish market, the meat market, even the grocery stores.
So I contend that if we had an understanding of the nature of American society, has been to make us disowners and to disenfranchise us. If we understood that history, then we could counter it. But
Yes.
by not having it as a part of our educational system, we can't even account for it. So
Right.
that now there's not even a discussion, in the hoods that we don't own any of these stores. The businesses, we don't own anything. We're what? We're people out looking for jobs. We have it has gotten so bad until black people have settled for selling CDs and stuff outside of the stores instead of being the owners inside the store.
Right.
We don't see that this is a pattern that's happening
Right.
all over the country. We don't own anything, but we're happy to be outside the stores hustling.
Right. And but you know, I think going back to what you said about us looking into our history, all people look in their history for solutions to their problems. No, historically, that's what people do.
Right. Yes,
And if just this whole thing of us being consumers and not being producers, we can look back and not that far back in time. And probably one of the prime examples of the historical time periods that does this is the period of the Jim Crow era when we could not go and shop in certain places. Right. What did this do? This enabled our businesses to thrive because we for the most part could only support our own businesses. Right here in Detroit, if we go back to the early 1900s, black people had problems being admitted into hospitals in Detroit. Yeah. So what did the black doctors do? The black doctors came together and created hospitals because during the time when a person was in an ambulance, the ambulance driver, someone would have to call to find out where's a bed available. Right. And when they called the hospital to find out where a bed was available, the first question was, well, what is the race of the patient? And all of a sudden, when it was found out there was a black person, oh, it's no beds available. And if we look historically, we can look historically. Black people came here in waves. Now, we have a history in Detroit going back to the 1700s. But there were major migrations here during World War I and World War II. But early on, in the early 1900s, black doctors, lawyers, and pharmacists came here because they knew that there were droves of black people coming here, and these doctors and lawyers knew that they wouldn't get many white clients. This was very much self-determination.
Yes.
You see?
But we have that has been educated out of us.
It has been educated out of us.
And
which
these are things that, and this is a concept that we're going to have to try to understand, and that is so much has been educated out of us until when we talk about education, we have to stop talking about it as if as long as you know how to operate a machine, that makes you intelligent.
Right. But what, you know, what in terms of things I've done research and things I think about, a very common misnomer, if we go back to the Africans that were brought here, and I'm going to ask you to speak about traditional education in a minute, it's a common misbelief that African people that were captured and enslaved and brought to here and other places were not educated. For any society to exist, you have to have an educational system in place. If we look at America, if there was no educational system in America that produced doctors, lawyers, all these type of people, the system would not be able to continue to exist. So many of the societies where Africans were taken from have been in existence for hundreds and sometimes thousands of years. And they had to have a form of education in place because the society could not sustain itself. The problem was not that we were not educated. We were not educated in a way that was suitable to fulfill the needs of the oppressors. So they had to re-educate us or re-socialize us. And we know...
They made us niggas.
Exactly.
That's right.
That's
interesting. So we have an educational system that produces black children who think rationally, think and believe that they are niggas, and they will argue with you that I am not an African, and they will, validate this term that was invented for them by Europeans.
Exactly. And I was in a class yesterday, and I was kind of making a similar point in saying that in a lot of our minds, the worst thing to be is an African.
Yeah.
And I told the students I was talking to, there are people, we'll accept anything. You can call me colored, Negro, the N-word, but if you call me African, I'm ready to fight. And that speaks to the degree that
the N-word?
I just don't say it. The one you just said. Yeah, that one.
Okay.
Go ahead, say it.
You did say it. When you say the N word, everybody know what you meant.
Of course.
So just go ahead and say it.
Okay.
But see, this is a problem that we have. Listen, words are powerful, right?
Yes,
so
they
the
are.
word itself is not bad. It's how you use it, right?
Okay.
So I would be all right if we use nigger and we were Africans in terms of our social behavior.
Right.
Our problem, the problem is that we call ourselves niggas, and that's what we are because we have been educated to hate, the African aspects of ourselves.
Right.
So that, you know, my question is, this is a massive hassle, a problem.
Which
education,
is okay.
miseducation.
Mhm.
But it's not a subject that is ever broached. We're gonna have to make this one of our main themes in terms of we are miseducated.
Yes.
And until we can get the common folks on the news and everyone to understand that this situation is not gonna ever change.
Well, I think the closest that we've come, and just going back all the way from ancient Kemet moving forward, African people have always educated themselves. Even under the process of enslavement and all that, we exercised our African agency, Kuji Chagalia, to find ways to educate ourselves.
Right.
And I think the efforts of the African-centered education movement was a clear example of what's needed in terms of what you just said. This was an effort, and it didn't start in Detroit, but in Detroit, various community people came together, families came together and formed family collectives and decided we needed an education system, a form of education that would facilitate producing leaders and workers that would help to change conditions for black people.
Yeah.
And for some reason, we have many of our young people that came from those institutions don't realize or haven't actualized the need to continue that for their children. You have grandchildren. Other people have many of these children that were produced by schools like Inseroma Institute and Aisha Shule now have children. And I've been in conversations with them where they were like, we need somewhere to educate our children. And what I remind them of, the people that created institutions that you came out of, they didn't wait for somebody to say,
Exactly.
you can have a school, here's a charter, here's some money. They came together. I mean, I could tell you the stories, and I know you know them, of how Aisha Shule came into existence, how Inseroma Institute came into existence. Inseroma Institute emerged out of Aisha Shule because of some disagreements. One of the teachers left. He had children in the school as well, and he started homeschooling his children. Other people that left the school with him said, well, can we bring our children? And out of this, first of one brother homeschooling his children, it turns into a collective homeschool, or a family collective homeschooling their children, and it emerges into a school. And this was all done because these people were committed to ensuring their children had a different type of education. And you were a part of that process on a variety of levels. We know that you were instrumental in, I can't remember, what was the Community Task Force,
Yes.
which was an organization
Community Task Force for Education.
Okay, thanks for helping to clarify, which was an entity, a community organization of activists, yourself, Brother Saeed, Brother MZ, Sister Tahira, what's the other sister's name?
Sister Rukia.
Rukia,
Yes.
advocating for the implementation of African-centered education in Detroit Public Schools. We have a caller. Good evening, caller. Welcome to good morning. I had to remember this is the morning show. Good evening and welcome to the Get Up Stand Up show. This is the Black in the Day and the 313 segment. Could you tell us your name and offer a comment or question, please?
This is Sylvia, and I've been listening to you off and on. Can you hear me?
Yeah, say your name again.
This is Sylvia, and I listen to you a little bit off and on.
We appreciate that.
And my question is, how do you reprogram a population that has been programmed already to so deep in self-hatred? You got your own people and other people that are headstrong and hating your people and hurting you and yourself. So where and how do we get to a common ground that we would understand that our unity is a threat to the enemy, And until we can execute, put in some execution to the solution, that we can take back our rightful place.
Well, sister, I appreciate you calling. It sounds like some of you have a perspective on what the solution is, because I heard some of the solution in the question as you posed the question. But in my opinion, we first have to start with our families. So in your household, and I don't know, I'm kind of out of the age where I'm thinking about having children, but part of the idea is if you're, what we model to children is probably way more effective than what we tell them. So first, I think we should begin in our families, and that even includes going back as far as who you choose to have children with and the type of families that you choose to build. And then I've seen this work as an example with Aisha Shule and in Saroma Institute. Families that had a similar way of thinking came together to create an institution in the form of a school. We first learn our cultural values, our morals, our norms in the families that we live in. And most people put their children, I don't think black people do this as much, but many people put school is the next level of learning from the family. And people tend to select schools that have similar values that they want to reinforce in their children. Of course, this takes a kind of systematic and a degree of thought in terms of planning and whatnot. And that's kind of my short answer. I know it was kind of long, but I want to let Bob Bonotchi respond as well. How do we change the minds of?
We have to change our minds through education. Until we, educate ourselves. That's it. I think the solution is very simple. I've seen the power of Afro-centered education on myself and on my youth, so that I know that within a span of like 5 to 10 years, we could turn this situation around with proper education. But the education has to be institutionalized. It has to start in the home, yes, but it has to be institutionalized, whereas anybody who comes to this institution, regardless of background, color, or whatever, you're going to get a certain curriculum in this institution that will condition your mind to be a more African-centered, loving, self-loving individual.
Yes, and I think for us, and you said it, and I just want to reinforce it. Part of the problem is we don't know who we are. We're African people. We're not Europeans. There's nothing wrong with being a European if you're a European. But as African people, we have different sensibilities. We're different. We have different things that make us tick. We're more in tune with the spiritual essence of the universe and all of this, but we tend to run away from our Africanness or African entity and seek to be European, and we're not European.
And
I agree with you totally, that we have to educate to liberate. But where and how can we get started? I mean, there's like these mega churches, but it seems like they've been Europeanized, and they got us tricked religiously as well as politically, so we're constantly following systems that were never in place for us from the very beginning. And I think that's part of the destruction of us, being programmed. So where would we find a common ground, a place of unity, like you would think the shrines or some of these mega churches, but once again, everybody seems to be Europeanized. I can't explain it, but they just taking on the lens of the oppressor,
Well, sister,
and not
sister,
the lens of where, like you said, where we come from, our culture, our spirituality, our true spirituality, the real gods and goddesses that's already in us has been snatched away, and we're told that we'll get our prizes, we'll get our prize when we die.
Sister
while we watch
Sylvia,
everybody else get heaven on earth.
Sister Sylvia, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I want to urge you to, can you send me an email, because I'd like to talk to you and maybe have you to come on the show and talk about what we're talking about a little more in depth.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you for taking my call.
say that again?
Thank you for taking my
Well,
call. I will listen to your information or your email.
I'm gonna tell you. Okay, thank you for calling in as well. My email address is. I'm gonna say it slow because it's kind of long. You ready?
Yes.
CHIKEKEFENTSE @gmail.com.
CHIKEKEFENSE
ENTSE.
ENTSE at Gmail.
Yeah, send me an email and we'll talk some more. And I love to have you to come on the show to talk about or to continue the conversation.
Yeah, we need solutions, executions
And,
to the
but you
solutions.
know, I don't. I think. See, one thing for sure, we all know the problem. Some of the
Yes.
probably
Yes.
most or least conscious people can tell you some aspect of the problem that black people face or African people face. I
We need to
raised
do
the question:
European
Do we really want to change? Do we want to be liberated? Do we want to be free? And are we willing to do the work that it takes to do that? Because essentially, in some respects, it would be akin to withdrawing from some substance. A matter of fact, it's
Right.
probably worse because we're addicted to a
Mhm.
lifestyle
Yes.
that is very detrimental to our very well existence. But are we willing to go through the withdrawal and take on the responsibility that it takes to be liberated and independent? Thank you for calling, and I look forward to
Okay,
hearing
thank
from
you
you.
for taking the call.
All right, peace.
The answer to that would be no. Because if we were, we wouldn't be in this situation. But I repeat, we don't even, the educational system has uh, hidden our condition from us so well until I repeat, we don't even know that we're in this state. For instance, we don't even have terms to describe our situation anymore. On the news, it's described as what? Racial diversity.
Hmm.
That's a problem. It's not. The problem is not that there is a lack of us. The problem is that the problem is in the way that we think.
Hmm.
So,
So
then,
elaborate
so
a little more when
well,
you say the problem is in the way that we think.
okay. In the '60s, there was a big thing about having a black mayor,
Hmm.
right? And the changes that was going to happen
Right,
once we get a black mayor,
right,
right? Once we get a what? A president, a black president.
right.
What's the change that's going to happen? Nothing happens because we had a black president who raised no black issues.
Well,
Right?
he couldn't. He
No,
couldn't.
no, no,
He
no,
couldn't
no,
even.
no. He could, but see, no,
Well, he didn't.
He didn't.
So
Right?
the result is the
The-
same.
right.
He
That's my
couldn't,
point.
and he didn't.
But the point is that he didn't because of miseducation. But see, it's not enough to say he didn't, which is obvious. It's why he didn't. It's miseducation.
Well, let me ask you this question: How would you compare uh, Coleman Young to Barack Obama as a black administrator in the executive branch of government?
What Coleman Young did when he got in office, he brought in a bunch of what? Of black activists with him,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
The whole city government changed downtown,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
At that time, when he brought a lot of those activists in, these were black nationalists, which means they had a certain thinking, right?
Hmm.
Now, for a while, that worked. But what happened? There became a war between the suburbs and Detroit.
Right.
Well, this is what we have to understand is always going to be the breaking point when we do our thing, and that is that, like, we have to be prepared that they're going to come and challenge us.
Okay. The reason I asked the question, I was just curious if you thought that if you think that Coleman Young was a better example of a black person being in that
Yes.
type of situation.
Yes, he was
Because
a much better example.
he exercised a lot. He enacted policies and different things
Right.
that were in the interest of black folks.
Yes.
And he had I think I'd consider Coleman Young as a master politician because he knew how to balance the interests of the powers that be, white folks, and to advocate for the interests of his people. I remember he said to L. Brooks Patterson and others that suggested that Detroit should enact a law that prohibiting firearms in the city. you know what Coleman Young's response was? The only way I'll unarm, I'm paraphrasing, the only way I'm going to disarm black people or people, the citizens of Detroit, is when the racist communities that surround Detroit are willing to disarm themselves. He came, he came into, when he came into office, he enacted policies, affirmative action policies, policies to hire black people, to make the those that worked in the civil service, that worked in city jobs, reflect the balance or reflect the demographics of the city. So you saw an influx of blacks being hired in the in the police department, in the fire department. He immediately got rid of stress, and he was sued for this.
Yes.
But and it was after he came out of office, I think it was under Archer, that the residency requirement for police was relaxed. And what a lot of us don't understand is that there were people that saw what Coleman Young was doing, corporate entities that were sitting back waiting for him to be out of office. We see the result of that when we go downtown today.
Yeah.
I was down at the festival, the jazz festival. And every time I go downtown, I'm reminded of how underdeveloped Detroit was when it was being controlled by black people. And this was intentional. People want to make you think that black people can't manage, we can't govern. That's not true. They undermine the city and various entities in the city to ensure that it was not as successful as it could be. And this again goes to education. Coleman Young came out of an experience. He was a man of the people. He came up in a time, he came out of that civil rights era, the Jim Crow era, where he was a race man. That's a concept we don't even hear people talking about. If you ask the young people.
Yes, Coleman, yes.
To a degree.
To a degree, yes.
But I'm saying there was a time when we knew that, or many of us operated from the premise that I have to do something that's going to contribute to the advancement of my people. Yeah. Now, if you ask the young person today, are you a race man, even if you gave it a different name, they would probably say, well, no, I'm for all people.
Right.
And what other people say that? What other people act like that? If we look at what's happening in the federal government today, even with these, the confirmation of this Supreme Court nominated person, these are racist white men who oppress everybody in the world, using their institutions to reinforce their power and to reinforce their ability to oppress other people. And we sit back and watch it and just complain and ooh and ah. The greatest historical figure I can think of in recent time that came up to challenge this and the most effective, beyond Barack Obama or anybody else, was Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who said he looked around and
can't even compare Garvey with Obama.
But
they
no,
have a different agenda.
Of course, but in many classes that I have, I ask my students, I say, okay, because we all hype, oh, Barack Obama, the first black president, all of this, and I think he's smart, he's intelligent, and all of that, but he was not an advocate for us. He wasn't an agent for black people, and I asked them to compare Barack Obama as a leader of black people to Marcus Garvey and what they were able to accomplish.
Yeah.
But
Obama's
people,
not a leader of black people.
well, but it's a lot of people you can't tell that to.
Yeah, but that's my point is that we live up under social myths.
Of course.
And that's a social myth.
Of course we do.
Obama was never, in his own words, he was not for black people. He was for
right.
all people.
And one of the things.
Matter of fact, well, okay, I missed my point. And that is, when I first started this, I wanted to explain that it takes more than numbers. That it was positive having these officials,
figures, yeah.
But we were looking at individuals, and we wasn't focusing on the consciousness, right? Now, Coleman was good, but we had these all over the country.
Yes.
Black mayors here and there. My point was that we were getting black officials, but we were getting black officials that were too much like Obama, and that was that we get in a position and we worried about other people calling us out for helping ourselves.
Right.
And that was my point, is that like our problem is one of what? Mentality. So that now we have all of these black folks that are in areas in a society but they don't carry a black consciousness in terms of looking out for the, you know,
Their
brother
own,
and sister.
right.
Right. They're looking out for everybody. Why? Because they want to be looked at as a racist in reverse. In the news today, that's happening. There was this morning, I can't remember what it was on, but they were having a discussion about a racist, a police officer who has caused the some youth. You know, they
Mhm.
have he killed them,
Mm-hmm.
and this is a national story, right?
Hold on, let's take this call. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the Get Up Stand Up Show. This is Black in the Day in the 313. Could you tell us your name and offer a quick comment or question?
I'm sorry, this is Sylvia calling back. I just want to say the trickery, the fakery, and the effery that's going on religiously and politically is what's constantly keeping us in this distraction trap. Obama, as well as many other black faces, are put in white spaces for a reason. They're window dressing, they got charisma, and y'all remember that good old book said, when the devil comes in a disguise, everything about him looks good, sounds good, smells good.
Okay,
Well,
Sylvia.
we need to know the difference of duplication.
Sylvia.
Thank you for taking my call.
That's why I said get in touch with me and we'll have you come on the show and we can discuss all of that.
CHIKEFETSE.
You know how to get in touch with Minister Malik Shabazz?
Yep.
Just
What's your
contact
name?
my name,
Yep.
Kafense Chike.
Okay.
Just get in touch with him. He'll put you in touch
I got
with me.
your email, CHIKEKEFETSE@gmail.com.
Yes. All right.
Okay, I got you. Bye.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Bonotchi.
This issue on the news.
About this police officer that are you talking
killed
about?
some black youth?
You talking about the one that got
disappeared.
convicted? They had one that just got.
This is one. No, it was in the news this morning. He kidnapped a couple of black youth, some boys, and he killed them. They disappeared.
He kidnapped them and killed them?
He kidnapped them. The last time they were seen was in. They were with him. They have not been seen. This is a national story, and they were talking about it on the news today.
Okay.
Right. The whole point was that this is not a race issue. This is everybody needs to be concerned about this. But
This is what they're saying.
This how it's played on the news. It was a black
Black young people. The police officer.
caster.
Oh, the newscaster.
It was a black newscaster, and her point was that this is not a black issue. It's everybody issue.
So she's
Everybody
gonna
should
make
be
it a
concerned.
non-issue
The
specific
point
to black
is that
people.
this is how the media frames things. Obviously, this is a black issue. These were two black youth.
Right.
The mama that's involved in her whole point was that my son as a black youth, this is how this is
This
the
is what.
result of
Yeah.
him
This
being
is what
a
happens
black
to
youth.
young black people. It
But
can't happen
but
to
the
us.
newscaster just says, that's not true. Well, she didn't. The way she presented the story, she was saying this is not true, because the whole point was throughout the thing was that this concerns everybody. This goes beyond race.
Right.
But this is a mantra that is repeated over and over again. It's just not true.
And
everything in America has a foundation in race.
And we tend to buy it. We got about 1 minute left, and I know. Actually, I want to ask you to come back. Maybe we can revisit this topic of education versus miseducation, or maybe once a month or something like that, because it's so pertinent, and we flock to these institutions, and Carter G. Woodson and others have told us that they do more to miseducate us than they do to educate us. And there's people in the audience that may say, well, you're a fine one to talk. I have 3 degrees. I went into that whole process. My whole purpose was to be able to access an aspect of education to teach children with the sanction of the state and in colleges with the hope of imparting knowledge and impacting people, particularly at the secondary education level, because that is where we really are trying to get away from who we are. And I thought if I could be in there and drop some knowledge on you, it might impact you in a way that you do something different. But I also know that you do consulting, and you have a couple of books out. Could you tell us the name of your books? The consulting that you do, we know that you're a master. I didn't want to say linguist for sure, but at Meganetta, you're one of the few people in the country that have been trained to break the Meganetta down. For people who don't know, that's hieroglyphics.
Yes, that's
But I just like if people want to,
language of historical record.
if people want to get in touch with you, they maybe want to consult with you. You do curriculum consulting, cultural consulting, and things like that. How can people reach out to you? And tell us the name of a couple of your books as
I have
well.
a Facebook page and email. The email address is bonotchim@ll.com. My latest book is called the Emmy Winuwiti, the African Star Watchers, in which I detail how the Africans invented time. And I know that's a concept that most of us think, you know, that the Greeks invented time,
Right.
and Star watching.
Right. Okay, well, we are literally out of time. Thank you, Brother Bonotchi,
Thank you
for
for
coming
having
in.
me.
We appreciate it. We're going to come back to this. We know we won't end it in one or two conversations, but at least we can continue to bump people's heads. And always, we welcome you to the Get Up Stand Up. Thank you for watching the Get Up Stand Up show. We have a caller on the line. Unfortunately, we cannot take the call. And we ask you to continue to watch. And always, as always, we close our show with the words of the great Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garber. We say, up, you mighty race. You can accomplish what you will.
You're watching WHPS, Highland Park, Detroit.
Time and money.
Participate